The dog's barking cuts through the heavy silence of the crowded airport. Passengers looked irritated, white lights shining on tired faces. In the middle of the crowd, a little girl stands motionless, her eyes fixed on the dog. She doesn't speak, she doesn't cry, but her eyes scream for rescue and hope. The German shepherd pulls forcefully on the leash, breathing shallowly, instincts on high alert. In that instant, between light and darkness, the destiny of a family begins to change. Sergeant Lucas had worked in the K9 unit of the police for 10 years. His partner was Thor, a huge dog, but with a sensitive and loyal heart. Everyone said that Thor seemed to sense the soul of the people around him. On difficult days, it was the dog's gaze that brought peace back to Lucas. That morning, Boston Airport was buzzing with a storm of voices. Lights, advertisements in English, luggage carts, children running everywhere. Lucas walked at a calm pace, trying to keep his mind clear. He thought of his own mother, who always told him to have faith. "Every mission has a purpose," she repeated, holding her son's hand. Since childhood, Lucas dreamed of protecting those who were alone and afraid. Now, every patrol with Thor was a chance to be a silent hero. They weren't seeking glory, only protecting families who would never know their names. Thor sniffed the air intently, snout down, steps firm. For many, he was just a working dog. For Lucas, he was family. At home, the dog would turn into almost a giant puppy, begging for affection on the sofa. But at the airport, his gaze changed, becoming serious and profound. It was as if Thor's soul could sense the presence of darkness from afar. Lucas trusted this instinct more than any device or screen. Before starting his shift, Lucas took a deep breath and said a short prayer. He asked for protection for everyone, especially for the children and his mother. He also asked that if something came like a storm, he should have courage. Beside him, Thor merely observed in silence, but the heart seemed to understand. That day there were no special orders, just patrolling and keeping the peace. They never imagined that a little girl would change the destiny of everyone there. Thor walked between the boarding lines, guided by Lucas. Announcements echoed through the high ceiling, creating a constant background noise. The dog kept its snout moving, sniffing bags, shoes, coats. It was routine, searching for the scent of explosives, drugs, any invisible threat. Suddenly, however, something different made the dog's heart race. He stopped, as if his breath caught in his throat, and fixed his gaze ahead. In the middle of the line for Gate 27 was the little girl. She was holding the hand of a tall man with a hard, cold expression. The girl seemed too small for the silent storm raging around her. His eyes didn't sparkle like those of a child about to travel. Tears welled up in her eyes, held back by sheer fear and loyalty to her mother. Thor sensed something in her soul, something that words couldn't explain. The dog pulled on the leash toward the girl, ignoring the normal route. Lucas found it strange, but he had known about that change in the dog for years. When Thor acted this way, it wasn't out of whim or curiosity. It was the hero instinct awakening, something between faith and alertness. "Thor, what's wrong, kid?" he murmured, trying to keep up with the movement. The air seemed to grow heavier, as if the light had dimmed. The girl didn't react immediately when the dog stopped in front of her. She slowly raised her eyes and met Thor's gaze. In that encounter, something silent passed between heart and heart. No words, just silence, and a hidden plea for rescue. The man next to her squeezed the child's arm tighter. It was a hard, quick squeeze that the dog perceived as a threat. Thor growled low, a sound coming from the depths of his soul. It wasn't hate, it was a desire to protect someone who felt alone. Lucas moved closer quickly, sensing the change in his partner's breathing. "Sir, is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice calm and professional. The man forced a smile, saying something about being afraid of dogs. But the girl's eyes told a different story, fixed on Thor's light. In an almost imperceptible gesture, the little girl moved her free hand. She placed her fingers on the dog's chest and drew a small circle. Then she touched her own heart twice, as if it were a secret code. It was the kind of sign that could go unnoticed by any adult, but not by a dog trained to notice even the smallest detail. The silence between the two seemed to scream for help, loud and urgent. Thor tilted his head, feeling the child's light touch. That hand trembled, but there was faith in that silent gesture. He smelled dried tears, ancient fear, nights without peace. The dog responded by moving even closer, as if wanting to hug her. Lucas realized that this was no simple puppy affection. It was the soul of a child trying to speak without using their voice. The man pulled the girl back, trying to move her away from the dog. "She's scared. She's nervous about the flight," he said, a little sharply. But Thor did not back down. On the contrary, he took a step forward. He barked once loudly, making some people turn around in fright. In the dog's eyes, there was more than instinct. There was destiny pushing. Lucas felt a chill run up his spine, like a harbinger of a storm. Other security agents looked in the direction of the barking. Some frowned, thinking the dog was just agitated. "Lucas, control the animal," he heard over the radio, in a tense tone. But in the policeman's heart, something told him to listen to Thor first. He saw the way the girl pressed her hand against her body. It was a gesture from someone who felt alone, even when surrounded by people. Thor brought his snout close to the handbag the man was carrying. He sniffed carefully, took a step back, and barked again. Lucas knew that barking wasn't typical of a chemical alert. It was a different kind of sign, more connected to human presence and the soul. The dog looked at the girl, then at the bag, as if connecting the dots. There was a story of darkness there that had not yet come to light. A little girl tried to speak, but her voice died in her throat. She looked around and saw only strangers hurrying by. Then he closed his eyes for a second and repeated the same sign. He drew another circle in Thor's fur with a trembling hand. The dog pressed its chest against her body like a shield of love. In that silent embrace, the girl entrusted her destiny to that hero. Lucas knelt down beside the two of them, trying to get into their field of vision. "What's your name, little princess?" "Are you all right?" he asked. She didn't answer, but her eyes filled with suppressed tears. Thor lightly licked her hand, as if to say, "You're not alone." The police officer noticed a purple mark on the child's arm, somewhat hidden. A small detail, but one that cut to her heart like a blade. The man noticed Lucas's gaze and tugged at the girl's sleeve. "She fell yesterday, that's all. We're family," he hastened to explain. But something in his tone of voice sounded false, lacking warmth, lacking genuine love. Thor growled again, this time louder, his whole body in a protective stance. The dog's breathing quickened, as if each breath heralded danger. Around them, the murmur grew louder, and the peace of the airport began to crack. A boarding announcement rang out, calling passengers to the same gate. The man tried to move forward with the girl, ignoring the dog's blocking position. Thor stood before them, firm as a wall of fury and faith. Lucas held the leash, but felt he shouldn't pull back. It was as if the dog's own soul was saying, "Don't let this child go." At that moment, the line between protocol and compassion became very thin. A security supervisor approached, her expression serious. "What's going on here, Sergeant? The dog is scaring the passengers." Lucas swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility on his heart. He knew he had little time to make a difficult decision. Thor, standing beside her, kept his gaze fixed on the girl, a gaze full of loyalty. Silence and tension filled the small circle around them. The girl then did something that no one expected amidst the chaos. She let go of the man's hand and hugged the dog's neck tightly. Her small body trembled, her heart pounding against Thor's chest. In the dog's ear, she whispered, almost inaudibly, a broken word. Lucas didn't understand the sound, but he saw the tears silently streaming down his face. In that embrace, the little girl gave her hope to the only hero there. Thor responded to the whisper with a sharp bark, almost a scream. He turned to Lucas and the other agents as if to speak. A fixed gaze, a heaving chest, each breath pleading for someone to believe. The dog then pulled on the leash away from the gate, in the opposite direction. I wanted to take everyone to another spot, where something hidden awaited. Between light and darkness, the clue that would change everything was already there. The supervisor crossed her arms, staring at Lucas with a hard expression. "Sergeant, your dog is out of control. This could become a problem." She saw only a large animal, not the heart that was on alert for the little girl. Nearby, some passengers were filming with their cell phones, curious about the scene. The man insisted on continuing his journey, saying that his family was running late. Caught between protocols and instinct, Lucas felt his own soul in conflict. "He's not out of control. He's trying to tell us something," she reacted. Lucas's voice came out strong, but inside there was a mixture of fear and faith. Thor was pulling in the opposite direction from the gate, barking at short intervals. It was like a code between the dog and its partner, a silent request for trust. The girl was still holding onto a piece of his fur, like an anchor of hope. The air seemed denser, as if the light had been covered by clouds. "Sergeant, we need to clear the line. The flight can't be delayed," she insisted. An officer nearby suggested moving the dog away and letting the family continue. This idea cut Lucas to the heart like a knife. He looked at Thor and saw the same old loyalty there, intact. The dog's soul told it that something very wrong was happening in silence. Ignoring that instinct would be betraying years of partnership and loyalty. The man sighed impatiently, feigning calm, but his gaze betrayed the storm. "Look, my daughter is afraid of airports. She's nervous, that's all, okay?" Her hand gripped the suitcase handle tightly, its flesh almost white with tension. The little girl kept her eyes on the dog as if pleading, "Don't leave me." There was no true love in the man's gesture, only haste and control. Thor smelled the bittersweet scent of old tears, clinging to her memory. Lucas asked for documents in a voice that was still polite but firmer. The man handed over passports, giving names that sounded correct. Nothing seemed illegal at first glance. Everything was in perfect order. But the dog wasn't lying, and Lucas's heart had known that for years. Thor sniffed the suitcase again, his snout tense, his body locked between light and darkness. It wasn't a typical explosives alert, it was something more human, something deeper. "Let's go to a private room, please. It's procedure," Lucas suggested. The supervisor hesitated, torn between rules and the growing lines. "Is this going to take much longer?" a passenger complained, already annoyed by the delay. The atmosphere turned into a small storm of judgmental voices and glances. The man tried to take advantage of this, saying that they were humiliating his family, but Thor growled softly, as if cutting the mask with his own instinct. The girl took a deep breath, her small chest rising rapidly in despair. She looked at the supervisor, then at Lucas, then at the dog. Silently, she brought her hand to her neck and pulled off the necklace with a pendant. It was a small, scratched heart, as if it had been squeezed many times. She discreetly showed it to Thor, as if surrendering her soul there. Tears began to well up, timidly, glistening under the white light of the airport. Lucas noticed the gesture and felt a punch in the heart. That small sign asking for help was no coincidence. He moved closer to the girl, lowering his tone and body height. "Did someone do this to you?" he asked, glancing at the purple mark. She didn't answer with her voice, but the silence was too loud to ignore. Thor rested his head on her hand, shielding her from the surrounding storm. The supervisor sighed, feeling the weight of that silence as well. For a moment, the cold professionalism gave way to compassion. "Okay, take them to the triage room. I'll hold the gate for a few minutes. It was a small opening, but enough for the truth to breathe. The man protested, saying that this was abuse and that he knew his rights, but his eyes trembled, betraying the confidence of his own voice. As they walked toward the private room, Thor went ahead. With each step, the dog looked back, checking if the little girl was coming. She walked beside Lucas, now a little less alone, despite his fear. The man's suitcase swayed, far too heavy for a simple family outing. The hallway seemed narrower, the lights colder, the air heavier. It was as if the darkness was being pushed into a corner with no way out. Inside the room, the atmosphere became even more tense and silent. A simple table, 2 chairs, a camera in the corner, everything impersonal. Lucas asked the girl to sit down while the man remained standing. Thor stood by her side like a living shield of love and loyalty. "We're just going to check the bag. It's a matter of security," Lucas explained. His heart was beating fast, torn between duty and the instinct to protect. The man exploded in complaints, calling it absurd. "You are traumatizing a child. This is a crime." His voice echoed in the room, trying to mask his own fear. Thor couldn't take his eyes off the girl, but his ears followed his tone. There was something about that speech, a whiff of lies mixed with cheap perfume. The dog sensed the storm gathering, but kept its soul firmly focused on its purpose. When Lucas touched the trunk to open it, Thor gave a dry bark. It was a short, direct sound that froze the police officer's movement. The dog then turned quickly and looked towards the living room door. A faint notification sound echoed from the hallway, coming from a cell phone. The girl looked up, as if she recognized that distant sound. At that moment, doubt grew. Was the threat inside or outside? A second officer entered, breathless, holding a tablet in his hand. "Lucas, we have a message from the International Alert System." He placed the device on the table, the screen glowing in harsh light. A photo surfaced, the man's face with a different name in another country. Next to it is a description of a complaint about a kidnapping involving a child. Lucas's heart sank and ignited at the same time, in a mixture of hope and horror. "That's ridiculous! That photo is old! That's not me!" the man shouted. Her voice lost control, and the mask of calm completely crumbled. He took a step closer to the girl, trying to pull her towards him. Thor reacted with a leap, placing his body between the two, ready to protect. The dog growled loudly, not out of anger, but purely to defend its little soul. The girl huddled behind him, finally letting the tears fall freely. Lucas pointed with his open hand, gesturing for the man to back away. "Step away from her now, please. This isn't just about a suitcase anymore." The tension in the room turned into a full-blown storm, ready to explode. The man's gaze darkened somewhere between rage and despair, as if cornered. Thor sensed the adrenaline and imminent danger, each breath quickening. Between silence and screams, the line between safety and tragedy became blurred. The man, in a sudden movement, dropped the bag and tried to run for the door. I wanted to escape before the truth gained strength and full light. The second officer tried to block him, but was pushed aside. For a second, everything seemed to spiral out of control, like a blurred frame. That's when the little girl, still crying, made the sign to Thor again. A circle in the air, then a hand on the heart, asking the dog to finish what it started. Thor did not wait for a verbal command. He simply obeyed the soul's agreement. He ran, catching up with the man before the door opened completely. A controlled grip on the arm, without hatred, just technique and heroic instinct. The man's body was thrown against the wall, preventing his escape. Lucas quickly approached, handcuffs in hand, heart ablaze. Meanwhile, the girl breathed for the first time with a little peace. With the man restrained, the atmosphere in the room changed. It was still heavy, but different. The darkness was beginning to lose its power, pushed away by the courage of a dog and a child. Lucas looked at Thor, then at the girl, feeling his own heart tremble. He knew that this was not just an airport security issue, it was an entire life that had been kept silent, under fear and control. And now, finally, the truth had found space to speak aloud. The supervisor entered the room, seeing the man in handcuffs and the dog on alert. "What on earth happened here?" she asked, incredulous at the scene. Lucas showed the tablet with the complaint and the photo, explaining it quickly. Her face turned pale as she looked at the little girl hugging the dog. Thor licked the tears from the child's face, as if erasing years of darkness. At that moment, doubt gave way to a profound respect for the hero's instinct. Lucas opened the suitcase left by the man, his hands steady despite his rapid breathing. Inside, folded clothes concealed a thick envelope, yellowed at the edges. Thor pressed his nose against the envelope, confirming that this was the key point. Upon opening it, Lucas found travel documents belonging to another child who had gone missing. The little girl's eyes widened when she saw the name of another lost soul like herself. The silence in the room became as heavy as an entire wall of darkness. Next to the papers, a cell phone fell to the floor and lit up its cracked screen. A series of messages appeared, with cold instructions and payment numbers. There were photos of the girl taken while she was sleeping, like catalogue merchandise. Thor growled softly, approaching the girl as if trying to hide his horror. Lucas felt his heart sink, his fingers trembling as he swiped through the images. It was the kind of truth that nobody wants to see, but that needs to come to light. The girl covered her face with both hands, tears streaming down her face silently. Thor rested his head in her lap, in a pure gesture of love and protection. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to remain calm in the face of the brutal impact. He knew that the little girl was carrying a storm far greater than herself, and at that moment, the dog was the only anchor preventing her soul from crumbling. The police officer silently swore that nothing would hurt her there again. The supervisor analyzed the files, her face hardening with each photo. This is part of an international network. She is a victim, not a bystander. The words made the girl feel even smaller, shrinking within her own pain. Thor lay down in front of her, forming a living barrier of loyalty. It was as if the dog was saying, "If anyone wants to hurt you again, they'll have to go through me." The cold light of the room reflected off the tears, transforming them into tiny glimmers of hope. A technical agent rushed in, laptop in hand, screen full of code. "We traced the origin of the messages. He was going to deliver it today, at gate 27. Lucas felt his breath catch in his throat. A few more minutes and it would all be too late. The girl sobbed, hugging Thor tightly, as if she were embracing life itself. The dog responded, pressing its chest against her body, blocking any shadow. It was the kind of scene that nobody should see, but that the world needed to understand. The handcuffed man tried to deny everything, shouting that it was all a fabrication of the system, but the fear etched in his eyes betrayed years of hidden darkness. Lucas approached him, his voice low but firm as steel in flames. "You're not going to hurt anyone else. Not today, not ever." Thor growled behind the policeman, like a living echo of that sentence. In the corner of the room, the girl finally raised her head, gathering courage. In a weak voice, almost a broken whisper, she uttered 3 words. "He... not... father." Lucas felt the ground tremble beneath his feet when he heard that so directly. She held up the heart-shaped pendant, her hands trembling, showing it to the camera. Behind them, Thor kept his gaze fixed on her, his heart connected to hers. It was the purest testimony that child could offer to the world. The supervisor ran a hand over her forehead, trying to absorb the gravity of the situation. "We need to activate child welfare services, psychologists, all available support." But before she could finish, Thor gave another warning, his body tense. He pricked up his ears, looked at the door, and then at the open suitcase. "What's wrong, kid?" Lucas murmured, already recognizing that instinct. Thor placed his paw on the inside of the suitcase, indicating another secret. In the false bottom, there was a small, carefully folded baby blanket. It was light blue, with star designs worn by time and so many tears. The girl recognized her immediately, her breath catching in her throat with emotion. She picked up the blanket and pressed it against her own face, like a lost memory. The scent brought back fragments of love and family before everything fell apart. Thor touched the blanket with his snout, honoring the silent history kept there. The man, upon seeing this, lost any pretense of innocence. His body collapsed into the chair, his hands trembling, defenseless beyond repair. "She was going to report me. I couldn't let her come back," he murmured. The confession fell heavily on the floor, like the final piece of a complete horror. Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, feeling his heart burn inside. Thor approached the girl, as if to say, "It's over. You're safe now." The team reinforced the handcuffs, placing the man under full custody. Outside, the corridor remained quiet, as if involuntarily respectful. Lucas called social services and the child psychology team immediately. The girl was still clinging to the dog, breathing irregularly, but for the first time there was a trace of light in her eyes. It was the beginning of hope, as fragile as it was precious. When the psychologist entered, Thor didn't let anyone approach immediately. He observed every movement, every intention, every nuance in the human eye. Lucas placed his hand on the dog's back, conveying calm and confidence. "Everything's fine, Thor." She came to help. The dog finally relaxed its body, but without losing its protective posture. The girl rested her head on him, searching for the last thread of peace of the day. The psychologist knelt beside the child, her voice soft. "Honey, you're safe now. We'll take care of you." The little girl looked at Lucas, seeking confirmation in his face. He smiled with his eyes, even though his heart was still pounding. Thor licked her hand, as if sealing a pact of trust, and in that simple gesture the most profound revelation of the day was born. The truth wasn't just in the bag or in the documents or on the tablet. The truth lay in the silence that the little girl had kept for so long. It was in the signal she made on the dog's chest, a wordless plea for rescue. It was instinct that guided Thor, even when no one believed in him. It was in the invisible bond between a broken child and a four-legged hero. It was light overcoming darkness, slowly but relentlessly. The girl took a deep breath, for the first time without immediate fear. She embraced Thor with both hands, as if embracing destiny itself. The dog closed its eyes, feeling her soul recompose itself in small pieces. Lucas watched that sacred encounter with a heavy heart. She knew that this was the point where her life began again, and the dog that saved everything was right there, resting in silence. Thor looked at Lucas for a moment as if asking for permission. Then he sat down right next to the girl, his body pressed against hers. It was more than protection. It was the promise that she would never be alone again. The psychologist smiled, recognizing the strength of that newly revealed bond. "He was your hero today, darling," she said, her voice filled with emotion. The girl, still crying, simply nodded, holding the pendant tightly. As they led the handcuffed man down the corridor, the airport seemed like a different place. Passengers watched in silence, unaware that they were witnessing a real rescue. Thor walked beside the girl, like a guardian who vanquishes darkness. Lucas followed closely, attentive to each fragile breath of the traumatized little soul. The psychologist kept a gentle hand on her back, guiding her carefully. The air felt lighter now, as if the light was slowly returning. The officers took the man to the police car parked outside. The door slammed shut with a dry sound, bringing an end to the storm he had created. Lucas watched the vehicle drive away, feeling a mixture of relief and responsibility. Thor remained seated, alert, as if watching until the very last second. The cold wind outside ruffled the dog's fur, carrying the scent of freedom. The girl pressed the blue blanket against her chest, finding a little peace. In the children's support room, the girl finally received water, a blanket, and security. She remained by Thor's side, refusing to leave his side for even a moment. Lucas recognized that kind of connection. It was love made of trauma and hope. Thor laid his body on the ground, leaving room for her to lie down nearby. The child rested his head on the dog's chest, listening to the rhythm of its heartbeat. That simple sound brought back to her a sense of family that seemed lost. The psychologist was talking to Lucas, explaining the beginning of the legal process. She will need ongoing support. But today was a big step. Lucas nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the two on the ground. Thor kept his head held high, attentive to every sound, every movement. The girl stroked his fur, like someone holding a rope to avoid falling. It was her soul trying to be reborn with each small touch of confidence. The company cell phone beeped with a notification from the investigation center. A preliminary report confirmed that the man was a suspect in 2 countries. Lucas felt his heart race. Thor had saved more than one life. The team celebrated discreetly, respecting the child's silence. Thor looked at Lucas with that deep gaze of someone who understands everything. It was the look of a silent hero, aware that his mission had been accomplished. Soon after, officers from the Child Protection Unit arrived at the airport. They introduced themselves with gentle voices and discreet smiles, without any hurry. Thor stood up slowly, instinctively positioning himself between them and the girl. Lucas placed his hand on the dog's back, conveying calm and permission. "It's all right, kid. They came to protect you," she said in a soft voice. The girl held the heart pendant, taking her first deep breath. The officers explained to the girl that she would be kept in a safe and secure location. His words were simple, but filled with hope for a better future. She looked at Thor, her eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. Thor nuzzled his nose against her face, as if to say, "I'm here." The child wrapped his arms around the dog's neck in a long hug, pressing his soul against the dog's. It was the kind of goodbye that changes both of their destinies forever. Lucas knelt beside her, placing a hand on her frail shoulder. "You are very brave, and he was your hero today." The girl smiled for the first time, a small but genuine smile. Thor wagged his tail slowly as a sign of peace and trust. Her little heart seemed to find light after so much darkness. At that moment, the dog's presence was more powerful than any words. Before being taken away, the girl made the sign on her chest one last time, a circle in the air, then a hand on one's own heart, and then on the dog's chest. Thor followed the gesture with his eyes, forever memorizing that code. Lucas felt a lump in his throat as he watched the scene unfold. The psychologist discreetly wiped away her own tears at the moment. It was the quietest and most powerful farewell they had ever seen. The hallway door opened, and the officers called the girl by name. She walked slowly, taking small steps, but with the blue blanket in her arms. Thor took 2 steps back, wanting to follow, but knowing he couldn't. Lucas held the leash firmly, understanding his partner's wish. "She'll be all right, kid. You brought her back to the light." Thor lowered his head as if accepting the truth, but feeling its weight. When she disappeared down the hallway, silence filled the entire room. Thor remained staring at the path she had taken, motionless. Lucas approached and sat down next to the dog, out of respect for the moment. No sound, just the echo of a small soul finding freedom. The police officer patted Thor's head, feeling his heart clench. "You've done more than any human could have done today," he whispered. The supervisor returned, now with a completely different expression. There was respect, admiration, and even a hint of genuine gratitude in their eyes. The report is being sent to the press, but they highlighted one thing. She looked at Thor, as if speaking directly to him. They said a dog saved a child today, before any adult could. Thor pricked up his ears, as if he understood every word spoken. Lucas sighed, allowing his body to relax after so many tense hours. The airport had returned to normal, but he knew that nothing would ever be the same. Thor walked to the glass window, watching the sky begin to darken. The lights from the planes reflected in his eyes like stars of hope. The dog's soul seemed at peace, even after so much turmoil. It was as if he knew he had fulfilled a greater purpose. A small group of passengers who had witnessed part of the scene approached. They thanked Lucas, but mostly they looked at Thor with reverence. "That dog is a true hero," someone said, their voice filled with emotion. Thor simply blinked slowly, as if accepting the acknowledgement peacefully. For him, saving that girl wasn't about glory. It was about love. It was pure instinct. It was about protecting the family even when they didn't yet know how to ask for help. When they returned to the canine base, the familiar environment brought immediate calm. Thor went straight to the rug where he always rested after big missions. Lucas sat down next to him, taking off his cap and rubbing his tired face. The dog rested its head in the police officer's lap, breathing lightly. The storm had passed, but the memory of the girl still throbbed there. They both knew that day would never be forgotten. The following night, the team received a call from the foster home. The girl was safe, well-fed, accompanied and protected. She had asked about Thor, saying that the dog was her light friend. Lucas smiled, with discreet tears stealing space in his own heart. He relayed the message to the dog, who wagged its tail as if it understood everything. The connection brought peace to the atmosphere, like the end of an answered prayer. Thor then lay down on the little bed, his eyes slowly closing in pure peace. In his mind, perhaps the memory of the girl still echoed like perfume. Lucas turned off the lights, leaving only the faint glow of the hallway. Before leaving, he cast one last glance at his partner, full of pride. "You changed a destiny today, my friend," he murmured. The dog took a deep breath, in sacred response to what had been done. Sometimes a child's silence speaks louder than any words, and sometimes only a dog, with a pure heart, a clean soul, and a divine instinct, can hear that silence. Thor didn't see danger. He saw a cry for help that the world was ignoring. And in that small gesture, in that almost invisible sign, he saved an entire destiny. The truth is simple and profound. Heroes don't always speak. Some simply breathe beside us and protect us. If this story touched you, leave A in the comments.